Hi, I'm going to give you an overview of my photography workflow using the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite. I'm going to cover the steps that I take from importing images into my computer all the way through final edits. Many of these steps can be performed different ways depending on the purpose you have for your photographs and your personal preferences. This simple workflow keeps me organized, is non-destructive to my files, and helps me to process images efficiently and effectively. Let's begin. The first thing that I do when I come home from a photography shoot is take the SD card that holds my images, put it in the SD card reader in my computer, and import them into Lightroom. If I have Lightroom already open, I'm in the Library module. There's an import button in the bottom left corner. If the import screen doesn't automatically load, I simply click on Import to bring it up. Here, in the middle of this screen, I will see all of the images that are on my SD card, and I will have an opportunity now to check or uncheck whichever ones that I'd like to import. I always leave them all checked. The only time that this is different is when I have images that I've already previously imported, and I will uncheck those. But in this case, I'm going to leave them all checked. I'm going to check on the left-hand side of the screen that I am indeed importing from the SD card. My SD card is untitled, so that is correct. In the middle above the photos, you'll see an option: Copy as DNG, Copy, Move, or Add. Copy is the selection that I have, which is it's going to copy the images exactly as they are in the raw format from the SD card onto the drive that I specify. Copy as DNG. DNG is another raw format that you can use that will often take up less room than your camera's proprietary raw file format. This can be really helpful if you want to save space. In my case, I do not copy as DNG, only because doing this also takes a lot more time. I have purchased several external drives because the hard drive on my computer is not very large. These external drives, I make sure that they are fast and have great capacity so that I can actually work right off of these external drives while I'm in Lightroom or Photoshop or Premiere Pro or whichever program that I'm using. In this case, I'm going to import my images to this Seagate Backup Plus drive. And along the right-hand side, I'm going to see some options. Under file naming, I always check off rename files, and I add a custom text that summarizes where these pictures are from. These images were taken at Spencer Smith Park, and so I'm going to make my custom text be something as simple as Spencer. I'm going to leave the extensions as is. The develop settings. Here is where I have created a metadata preset called Rachel Copyright. Here I can also add some keywords. Now this is very, very helpful if, one, especially if you're doing stock photography, because every picture that you do has to be keyworded. But it's also very helpful because if you keyword your photos with at least a few descriptive keywords, then anytime that you need to search for them, then it makes it easier for you to do so. So in this case, I'm just going to put sunrise, Spencer Smith Park, water, and that's it. Now, instead of just dumping these images right into the Seagate drive as they are, I put them into a subfolder. So under destination here, I actually change this subfolder title to whatever I'm working with. And this time it's going to be Spencer Import. I like to organize my files on my Seagate drive so that I know exactly where things are when I'm looking for them. So this is my import folder, and it's going to end up in the Seagate Backup Plus drive. Okay, so I have made sure that it's coming from my SD card. I've checked off the photos that I want to import. I make sure it's on copy. I've added my metadata, which are my keywords and copyright information, custom text for all of the photos to be renamed, and the location, and I'm just going to click on import. Once the import is complete, my card is ejected automatically. Now I have all of the images on my Seagate Backup Plus drive ready to edit and work with. The first thing that I'm going to do after everything has been imported is I'm going to go through and sort my pictures into two piles, pick and reject. So when I want to pick an image, I'm going to hit P, and when I want to reject an image, I'm going to hit X. Now, to clarify, usually I will only pick the images that I want, and the images that I don't want, I just ignore them and move to the next one. If you do go through and flag the rejects with the X button, the nice thing about that is that you can then sort your images by those that are rejected, delete them as a batch, and then make some more room on your hard drive. I never do this because I always keep my images. Whether they're terrible, they're fantastic, I keep them all because you never know when you may need them. Now that they're imported, I'm going to click on Shift Tab and select the first image. And what that's going to do is give me just a nice full screen image. And you can do two things. You can just look at the image the way that it is, or you can hit the L key, which will dim the lights so that you're actually looking at the image with a nice dark background. Or you can hit the I key, and if you hit it once, you're going to get the image size, but if you hit it twice, you're going to get your exposure information and all of the information that you use to capture it. So now I'm going to go through my images using the left and right arrows, and I'm going to hit P for those that I pick as choices. If I have any images that I have used in bracketing, so I have one that is underexposed, right on 0, and then overexposed, I'm going to choose all of those images because I'm going to work with them right in Lightroom after I've finished my selections. When I'm finished going through my images and choosing those that I have selected, I'm going to hit Shift Tab again. So all along the bottom, you're going to see all the thumbnails of the images that I have imported. I'm going to go to where it says Filter here, just above that, and I'm going to click on the first flag, which is the picked photos. These are all of the images now that I have chosen. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of those images by selecting them. I'm going to shift click. I have the first image selected. I'm going to shift click on the last image, and now they're all selected. And I'm going to go down on the left hand side here, and I'm going to make this into a collection. I just click on Create Collection, and I'm going to rename it Spencer Collection. I always make sure that Include Selected Photos is checked, and I'm going to sync it with Lightroom CC. So I click on Create, and you'll see up in the left that it's syncing my photos, and I now have this nice collection of imported images. Now, they're far from ready. You can see this first image is crooked and it needs some work with the lighting. As I said, they're raw images, so they come out usually a little bit flat and not the way that I would like them. So the next thing I do is I switch over from the library module to the develop module, which is the second tab at the top. I click to develop, and I'm going to go through each of these images, and on the right are all of these develop options, and the first one that I always choose is Auto. So when I click on Auto, Lightroom does its own analysis of the image and gives it edits based on what it thinks you might want it to do. This is usually my first step, just because it's really not a bad tool, but it usually isn't the final step. So I go through and I play with exposure, contrast, highlights, clarity, vibration, saturation, colors. When I want to do specific edits, I go to this color. Specific edits to colors, I go to this color panel. I come down further. I will check off remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. Most of the time, my camera and lens profile will already be set, but sometimes you do have to put that in yourself. I continue down, and the last thing I look at down here is dehaze. So this is where I do my initial edits. There are many things that you can do with Lightroom in terms of editing your images. And there are some that I like to do in Lightroom, and there are others that I really prefer to do in Photoshop. Great, so I'm going to go through these images and make some initial edits. Now, I had already mentioned that if I have an image that I bracketed because I wanted to get all of the details and the different exposures, I will choose all of them and then combine them with an HDR process here in Lightroom. So I do have 3 here. There's this first image of the pier and the 2 images beside it. So I'm going to select each of those images at the bottom in the thumbnails. I'm going to right click and I'm going to click on Photo Merge HDR. Lightroom's going to do its thing and merge those photos so that highlights and shadows become well balanced, or at least as well balanced as they can be given the images that you've chosen. Okay, so I like what it's done here. I'm going to click on Merge, and you'll see up in the top left that it's creating an HDR, and it's going to add it to my images. So now that my HDR image is here as part of the collection, I am actually going to remove the 3 that I used to create the HDR. So I'm going to still, when they're highlighted, right click, remove from collection. Once I've gone through and made initial edits to my images in Lightroom, I then edit them in Adobe Photoshop. To do this, I highlight the images that I have in my collection, and you'll notice that I removed a few more from the collection because as I edit, I see more what I like and I can compare between images. And so I have pared this down now to 8 images. So I highlight the ones that I want and I'm going to right click, and you have 2 options. You can export, which is what I used to do, or you can just edit in Adobe Photoshop. I like this option because when I do this, it brings my images into Adobe Photoshop, and when I save them, it brings them back into Lightroom. So now that I've moved my images from Lightroom to Photoshop, I'm ready to do my final edits. I always start with my horizon so that I don't forget it later. And to do that, I click on the crop tool, I click on the straighten up at the top, and then I just take it and draw a line across the horizon like this. Photoshop straightens it up nicely. I click the check mark and boom, that's done. The next thing I like to do is I go to Image and Autotone. Quite often, Image Autotone will just really help with the contrast, make the colors pop correctly, remove any color casts. It doesn't always work, but when it does work, it works well. So that's always the first thing that I do. If I like it, I keep it. If I don't like it, I get rid of it. You also have the option to fade it So you can go and click on Fade Autotone and reduce the opacity of what it did. Now here it didn't really do anything, so you're not seeing anything. Over here on the right, I play with my layers. I may play with brightness, contrast, make something brighter, add more contrast. I can add vignettes, I can take vignettes out. I will always go to my spot healing brush tool. There's almost never a time when I don't do this. And I click on Command plus until I've zoomed in to 100%. And I will start in one corner and I will work my way through my image at 100% and make sure that anything that is distracting or not an element to the photo that I want, I have deleted. It's really important to zoom in. If you have any spots on your lens, this is when you're going to see them. You may not see them when you're zoomed back out. So as I'm going through, I just keep an eye out for anything that maybe needs a bit of a cleanup. Okay, there are many other things that I do in terms of coming up with the final edit in Adobe Photoshop, but for now I'm just giving you an overview of my workflow, and so this is where I do those edits. Once I'm satisfied with an image, all I have to do now is click on File, Save, and Adobe will automatically save this as a PSD, which is a Photoshop file, and it will be available to me in Lightroom and also in that folder, the import folder that I created on my backup hard drive. I always do this. I save my Photoshop files so that I can go back and play with any of the edits that I've made, especially those that have to do with the layers on the right here. The other thing that I can do at this time is I go to File Info, and this is especially if I'm working with a stock photo. I will come in here and make sure that I've added all of the keywords that I would like, and I will give it a description, and usually it's something more descriptive than this, but this is just an overview, and I will give it a title. And the description should always be more descriptive than the title. As I said, this is just an example. And this is where my metadata that I had that preset on import will show up. So it shows up as copyrighted and my name, Rachel Lurch, author Rachel Lurch. I'm just going to click OK. So now all of that information is associated with this file. And if I'd like to make a JPEG image, I will go to File, Save As, and I will save it as a JPEG as well. Now the other thing just before you save it is to know what are you going to use this image for. If you're going to be printing it, then you might want to change the color space to CMYK. If you're going to be using it online, then you're going to pick a color space that is applicable for that. In this case, I'm just going to save it. So I'm going to click File, Save As, and I'm going to name it Pure Sunrise, change it to JPEG, and I can leave it in the Spencer import, or I can go to my drive, create a new folder and call this Spencer JPEGs and save it in there. So I'm going to do that, Spencer JPEG, I hit save, and the final thing that it asks me is about quality, and I always put it to the maximum possible and click OK. Now you'll notice when I go back to my Lightroom page here that there are two versions of this image. The first version is the one that I did the initial edits in Lightroom, and the second one, if you look just above the thumbnail, you'll see there's the name of the file. And the initial one has ARW, that's the raw file. Yours may have different letters if you use something other than Sony, or if you use the DNG, it would be a .dng, and that was the option on import. And then you'll see that there's a PSD. So you can see the difference between those images. But I have them both, and the other thing that I might make sure is, just in case, make sure that this whole collection is synced to Lightroom Mobile. And the reason that I do that is, say I'm posting on Instagram or Twitter or something, it's really nice when I have my phone or my iPad and I'd like to post one of those things, I can just go right into Lightroom Mobile, make any edits there that I need to, and save them directly and post them from there. So thanks for watching, guys. This is a really quick overview of my workflow, photography workflow from start to finish. I always record on 2 different SD cards simultaneously in my camera. If you have that option, I always suggest it. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, please leave a comment below and I'll be happy to answer. There's so much more that you can do with this and so many details that I haven't gone over because there's just so much available. I love using the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite, and yeah, so thanks for watching. Have a great day.